welcome to our protein podcast where we're going to talk all things protein. We're going to tell you what we think about protein and how we implement protein into our diets and how it's working for us. And we also just want to talk about the contrast that we have learned from doctors on YouTube about protein requirements and how we are actually changing their recommendations because we find that we have better strategies for reaching our trophy health inside and out. And we can't wait to dig into all of these things because each and every one of them is so important for feeling well and having that health that we all deserve to have inside and out. So this is going to get juicy. We are so happy that you are here with us live. And if you're not live, thank you for watching this video. And we are going to jump right in. Yeah. I am Sally, and this is Stephanie, by the way. And we are I Jump Instead because we jump on Rebounders for our resistance training, which we will get into in a bit. So Steph, why don't you go ahead and take it away with our disclaimer because we're not doctors.
Yeah, so I definitely want to just make it very clear that we are not health practitioners or registered dietitians or nutritionists, and our insights and perspectives on protein are based on the work of Dr. John McDougall and our personal experiences as starch-based eaters of almost 9 years. We believe in the importance of individual bio-individuality and that everyone's health journey is unique. Our discussions are meant to share our thoughts and encourage conversations rather than provide professional health advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet or exercise routine. So these are definitely anecdotal insights and opinions, and this will be a discussion based on our results and our experience with protein as well as with jumping and how those two combined have really given us supreme health and supreme physical results. We feel that we have excellent, healthy skeletal muscle tissue throughout our entire body. So we feel so excited and qualified to talk about this and connect you to our experience with a starch-based approach of eating protein.
Yeah, there are other strategies that we're going to be sharing with you because jumping instead and eating a starch-based diet are two of the things, but we're also going to be talking about nose breathing and hydration because before we get into protein, we really need to understand what comes before protein. We definitely want to have a strength training regimen in place in order for that protein to be put to use. And so we want to talk about jumping instead for our resistance training. And then we also want to talk about nose breathing because nose breathing makes our hormones so much happier and healthier. And so we need to immediately shut our mouths and start nose breathing day and night, and especially in our training. And then our hydration needs to be of highest priority. We must watch our urine color and make sure that if we're seeing dehydration through our urine color, we need to immediately knock back a couple glasses of water, especially right before bed because we go into sleep for 8 to 9 hours a night. And if we're going to bed dehydrated, it could be the perfect opportunity to knock a glass of water back. And then if we're resistance training by jumping instead, we also need to potentially be drinking more water. So jumping, nose breathing, and then eating a starch-based diet and staying hydrated will help us to use this protein that we're going to be eating so efficiently because what we're learning is that protein wants to be put to use, but if there is deficiency in the body's primary fuel source, which is glucose, which is starches, then this protein is actually converted into energy and it also is stored as fat. And so even if you think you're meeting your protein needs, the protein that you're eating might not even be going to building your muscles that you're breaking down. With one more side note, when we jump instead on a rebounder using gravity against our muscles to build our muscle tissue, we have a lot less breakdown. So we actually don't need as much protein as we may need if we're tearing those muscles down with iron muscle. So we're here to talk all things about starches, jumping, nose breathing, hydration. We're going to get into these things really quickly, and then we're going to dive into protein. And so hang tight for the protein discussion towards the middle of this podcast, because we want to get more into how important it is to jump instead and to nose breathe and to eat a starch-based diet. So then, like I said, the protein really means something for your body. So I'm going to go ahead and start with talking about how, when we switch to eating a starch-based diet, when we switch to jumping instead for our resistance training, and when we switch to nose breathing, we tend to go through a period of transitional resistance because we're changing our bodies. We're going from mouth breathing to nose breathing. So now our noses are going to potentially start to run a bit more. There could be some pain that we experience in the nose, and it might feel a little bit uncomfortable to breathe through the nose at first. And so when we switch to nose breathing, we need to just understand that there's going to be a period of time where we adapt and get used to nose breathing. And then once we do see that we're keeping our mouths closed throughout the day, potentially through the night, and then in our exercise, we are going to start to love it. We're going to become so much more calm in our training, as well as throughout our day and night. And this is going to improve our hormonal health, which is the foundation of building healthy muscle tissue. And we've learned recently that our muscle is essentially an organ in our body. And in order for us to have that healthy muscle organ, we really need to have that foundation of healthy hormones. And so it is so important to nose breathe. Even if you're watching this video right now, make sure that your mouth is closed. Your jaw is in alignment by staying closed. And that's called proper mouth posture. And then your tongue will be up on the roof of your mouth. And this way, your teeth are staying moist, your jaw is in alignment, and it's supporting your head. And then you are not letting your jaw hang. You're helping to tighten and strengthen your jaw muscles, which will help lift and tone your face. And then you'll be nose breathing and feeling better immediately. So the next thing that we need to do is transition into jumping instead. And so I'm willing to totally let you grab this one if you want, about what happens when we transition to jumping instead and how it exposes weaknesses in the body. Why don't you take it away?
So yeah, well, jumping is the most beautiful and profound form of resistance training that we've ever come across. It doesn't skip one cell in the body and makes a strong impact internally, externally, physically, emotionally, mentally. There are so many benefits. The benefits never, ever, ever end. And it is a really efficient form of resistance training because it ultimately is the safest, lowest impact exercise we can do for our bodies. It's so incredibly sustainable. It's fun. We can do it in the comfort of our own home. We can wear whatever we want to wear. And especially if we're on a high quality resistance mat, this is the best, most fun, most efficient way to connect all the muscles in the body, and so they all work as a team. It helps with proprioception and balance and coordination and skills, and it cleanses the body all in the meantime. It reduces inflammation. It helps our blood markers. It helps blood sugar. It just doesn't stop. The benefits just keep rolling and rolling, and the body wants balance and homeostasis, and jumping promotes that homeostasis and balance. So when it comes to jumping and and choosing a rebounder. There are so many rebounders available on the market. It's overwhelming. And there's Amazon, which has a lot of the less expensive or the budget-friendly rebounders. And then there are various online resources that have brands that offer more expensive rebounders. And then there's the discussion between spring units versus bungee units. So here at I Jump Instead, we have trialed and errored with some of the rebounders that are on the market, and we have concluded that the optimal spring rebounder available on the market is the Cellar-Sizer Spring Rebounder. It's a high-end, high-grade steel material, high-resistant, smooth bounce rebounder. It's a spring rebounder, so it may require a little bit of oiling once a year or something to keep the noise down. And if noise is an issue for you, it might not be your best option. But the Cellar-Sizer offers the highest quality resistance. Ultimately, it may be the only rebounder on the market that offers the access to the increased G-forces that really make the strongest impact on our bodies, on our lymphatic systems, on our muscle tissues and muscle growth and our flexibility, and so on and so forth. So we highly recommend the Cellar-Sizer Rebounder for the greatest results or the greatest potential of results. And then there are high quality bungee units available on the market. We love and recommend the Jump Sport 350 Pro and the 550 Pro. The differences between the two are the 350 is 40 inches like the Cellar-Sizer, and the 550 is what we call the Cadillac bungee unit. It's a 44-inch, it's beautiful, it's got more space. It's just a little bit of a softer bounce than the 350. I don't want to confuse you too much, but these two Jump Sports are recommended for the high quality bungee unit. There's also another brand out there called Bellicon, and they're quite more expensive. And so just, do your research and keep looking as far as, finding the best rebounder that works for you. But the Cellar-Sizer and the Jump Sport are the two high-end rebounders, spring versus bungees. And then there are other budget-friendly units on Amazon that can be a good rebounder to start on, but we're not recommending it for beginners. We're not recommending it for people starting out their jumping journey, because ultimately we want you on a high quality unit. First and foremost, as a beginner, we started on the Cellar-Sizer Rebounder, and ultimately jumping will get right to work on each individual body and expose our weaknesses. So if we've got the knee pain and we've got the back pain and there are things going on in our bodies, when we start gently bouncing on a rebounder, which it's a very specific way we should start jumping very strategically, but the rebounder will essentially bring out those and expose those weaknesses. So we do have a beginner's guide on our website, ijumpinstead.com. So when you get your rebounder with handlebar ordered, get it in your home, get it in front of your TV, get it in your living room, just have it somewhere where everyone will see it and use it, ideally once an hour or 2 times a day, in the morning and the evening, because if you're working all day, every body should be stimulating the cells several times a day, if not for 1 minute, several minutes. But definitely there should be an introduction or a transition phase. So we want to get you on our beginner's guide that's available on our website. Or you could instead do 1 to 2 minute gentle health bounce sessions once to 3 times a day for the first week. It may not seem like a lot, but for those who actually start their jumping journey in this way, they connect better. They start to adapt smoother. And some of us will assume that I can jump for 5 minutes, I can jump for 10 minutes in the first few sessions. And some of us, transition smoothly, or, they don't have too much aches and pains and weaknesses. And then some of us experience dizziness and profound suffering in some way, headaches, or the weakness is exposed. So you don't know where you fall in that category. We all, us included, think that we're stronger than we are. And when we start to jump, we're doing something that we potentially haven't done for decades. We might have done it as a child, jumped on our beds, because jumping is so fun and we do it instinctively. Even babies in the crib will bounce. Babies are bounced, soothed when they're, infants and newborns. They're soothed by rocking. So jumping is an instinctual, physical need of our bodies. So we're so lucky and happy to have rebounders existing so we can continue to jump into our adulthood and into our latest years, just till the day we float away. So this is just so beautiful, and let's get ourselves transitioned smoothly and make sure that we are so patient in that first month. Okay, so the beginner's guide, we also have at the end of the beginner's guide, we have the instructions of what to do next. We recommend either sitting pretty for another few weeks, noticing that you are feeling a certain way, and your body, you need to listen to your body and let your body guide you. You can jump into some of our free classes on YouTube. We have so many amazing workouts on YouTube, beginner friendly. Our feet stay connected, if not for 90% of the routine, like 99% of the routine. We are connected to the mat. We do not do high jumping, and we always use a handlebar. So like I said before, make sure when you invest in a high quality rebounder or a budget friendly rebounder, make sure you have a handlebar attached at all times. You will absolutely love your experience. So this is, there's also an opportunity for you to connect with other jump stars and ask questions to the community. What happens if I start to experience this? Or what do you do if this pain arises? Or what does this age range of jump stars prefer for the rebounder they choose? You can join our Facebook group and you can ask these questions. I Jump Instead is our private Facebook group, and Dave Hall, the creator of Cellercise, is also a resource. You can give him a call. Cellercise.com is the website that the Cellerciser is available. And Dave Hall has a phone number in the contact section, and you can give him a call and talk to him directly about the questions you might have, and he's willing to talk to your doctor. And as we had said before, definitely make sure to consult with your doctor when starting a new form of exercise or a diet, because ultimately you and your doctor need to make that decision. But just know that there's a transition period with jumping and with eating a new diet. So even if you're feeling uncertain, you might just incorporate it slowly, just to get your feet wet, just to see how your body starts to react, and you can take it one day at a time. I'm actually glad you mentioned that. With bouncing, with Jumping Instead, it really assists with digestion, which is the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is just the transition into a starch-based diet. So I can't wait to get into the starch-based diet with you, but I just wanted to point out that there will be a transitional process when we switch to a starch-based diet. And so just understand that that's coming. And so it might not be smooth right from the start. I call it the rainbow of resistance, because you're going to go over potentially a rainbow shape of going up and not necessarily feeling your best, but you know and understand what you're going towards. And since you know that, you're going to keep nose breathing and keep gently bouncing through this transition of you changing your diet, and then you will be feeling really, really good on the other end. And then you have all the support you need from continued jumping to building your muscles, which is the foundation of, it helps with digestive strength. And so we just covered nose breathing and how there's going to be a transitional process. There's going to be a transition when you jump into your jumping journey, and then there's going to be a transition into changing your diet. So with that being said, let's go ahead. She already quick recapped all the benefits of Jumping Instead. Phenomenal job, Steph. And then really just some of the benefits, because there are more and more and more. And it doesn't stop.
Yeah. And then the nose breathing, I already covered the benefits. I do want to say that it keeps us in a safer training zone. And one of the things that can really affect our hormones is training in a too high intensity. And so when we nose breathe, we immediately make our hormones more balanced. And again, this is vital for building that muscle tissue and having your protein go towards your healthy muscle tissue. And if your hormones are healthy, then all of that function happens very efficiently. And so close your mouth and nose breathe. Keep your hormones balanced. And you might have to take a large step back in your intensity, but that will still feel rewarding because you'll know that you're properly nose breathing. Another thing, it increases oxygen uptake. So you're immediately bringing more oxygen into your body just by nose breathing, which means you need to breathe less than you would. And we love talking about breathing in our workouts that we give you on YouTube, because breathing is a huge part of how you progress through your fitness journey. We want to see you get a trophy body. We want you to have that lean muscle definition that we both have through and through. We want you to see your jawline. We want you to have visible tone through your whole body. And so breath work is so big. It's not having to do exercises necessarily. It's just about being conscious with your breathing while you're training, which we guide you through in our classes. And then practice makes perfect. So we need that foundational hormone health with nose breathing.
And remember, it tightens the jawline to nose breathe. Even just incorporating nose breathing 1 year, you might notice that your face is more structured because your mouth is now lifted and your muscles are being more activated day in and day out over time, just by using your jaw to close your mouth.
Excellent. And so this is the juice, and then protein is next. So what I'm going to say is the quick recap of the starch-based diet, because some of you may have not heard of a starch-based diet. Some of you may have heard a little bit about it from us, and you're really excited to find out what it is and how it trumps eating a high protein diet, which is what we're coming into this podcast to say. And so, quick recap. First and foremost, glucose is the primary fuel source for the human body, and starches break down into glucose effortlessly. It takes a lot more energy for the body to break protein and fats down into glucose. So your brain needs glucose, your muscles need glucose. If you eat a starch-based diet, you're giving your brain and your muscles instant energy. And I don't mean instant like you're getting this blood sugar response where your insulin is coming in and elevating because you're getting this quick sugar to your blood. You are having the most efficient process of starches breaking down into glucose and then entering into your bloodstream with a low insulin response so that your brain and muscles can get energy fast. That is the long-term goal of eating a starch-based diet. Low insulin levels. And this is
there's a transition.
But that's one of the things that can happen when we're in the transition, is that we can have elevated insulin because our blood levels are potentially have excess fat in them. And when that happens, there's a response of excess insulin release when we have those carbohydrates. And that's why you hear doctors recommend to not have carbohydrates and to eat low sugar, because this causes a lower insulin response. Well, we aren't doctors, and there's going to be many podcasts ahead talking more and more about this. But for certain, I can say that as soon as you clean up your diet into a predominantly starch-based diet after going through the transition process, you will have low insulin response when you eat carbohydrates, because that is the way that the human body is designed. And so we're really excited for you to get to that other side of the rainbow if you choose to transition, because life becomes absolutely sensational.
I think what happens too is that we are ultimately so used to eating high fat, or definitely moderate amounts of fat. And so when we slip into the transition of starting to eat starches, we might be emotionally and mentally and physically dependent and connected to fats. And we desire fats to that degree where even if we do start to eat low fat, like she said, there is fat present in the body fat and fat in our blood. So we could right away, we could have a response that's not preferred. Like our body will have a different and kind of more stress response to that initial transition, eating more starches. But when we start to really wrap our head and our lifestyles around reducing the fat content in our diets, then that's when we start to have a smoother absorption of the starch, of the carbohydrates. And it's one day at a time, keeping our mouths closed, nose breathing, shoulders relaxed, just trying to get through and navigate as calmly and as faithfully as possible, knowing that we spend so many years eating the fats, eating more fat than we potentially needed, and we also are emotionally attached to the fat. So ultimately we're facing our addiction to the fats, which are also in large connected to the proteins. And so it's a mental journey of healing and of releasing those attachments. Journaling could help with that, just addressing the addiction outright, just putting it in writing in a journal and saying, now what? And you'd be amazed at how much relief you can get just from talking to yourself about your attachments and deep-seated emotional connections to fats and proteins that stem all the way back into childhood. And so that's why we do hear of the initial reactions to, I've tried a starch-based diet, I'm not feeling good, I'm having blood sugar issues or blood sugar spikes, but that will eventually dissolve, and that will slow down once we mentally, physically, and emotionally connect to more consistency with overall eating a lower fat diet, and as she said, transitioning with approaching starches in a whole starch or whole plant-based way.
Yes, so more reasons why we believe in starch-based eating. Starches are so high in fiber, okay, and that's something that all the doctors on YouTube that are talking about protein, the second most important thing that they recommend that you eat is protein.
If not the first.
Well, they're pushing protein, and then they say fiber, okay, and so fiber is in every single starch that we eat, check. Okay. Also, micronutrient content is through the roof because we're eating plants. We're skipping a process. That is, the animal eats the plant and then we eat the animal. We're just going straight to the plant. I can't wait for the next segment from what she's going to say. This is going to be profound.
The plant, aka the starch.
Right, the starches. Yes.
Not the lettuce. Not that we don't
I
eat
know,
lettuce, but it's
she's
not
right.
it's not the veggies. It's
She's
not
right.
the fruits. It's the starch.
Yes, plants are often put into the lettuce category. Starches are so satiating and satisfying. Think about a pile of mashed potatoes, okay? You're already satiated. Just keep that in mind. All starches have protein. All starches have amino acids. Check.
In just the right portion.
I can't wait for you to get to the next part. Especially wheat, legumes, quinoa, brown rice. Now, I know that there are wheat intolerances, but what we've learned is that the wheat intolerances have happened in the body because the body has put up a resistance because we're potentially not eating the diet that we're supposed to be eating. We would say you're not eating the diet you're supposed to be eating. So as soon as you go over this transitional rainbow of resistance, you will get to eat your wheat on the other side.
Maybe not every single incident.
Maybe not everyone, but we're hopeful. We're really hopeful because when you have easy world with being able to eat wheat, life gets really, really good. All right? There's no cholesterol in plants.
Is it lower? Is it zero or low? It's zero? Is it zero?
Zero. Zero cholesterol. Okay. No potential ingested antibiotics that are ingested into the animal. Okay, we don't want to be putting antibiotics into our bodies ever.
Did you say ingested or injected into the animal?
Ingested that have been injected into the animal. Yes. They're not only injected with antibiotics, but they're also injected with hormones often. And so that makes them bigger cows, right? Hormones make us grow, well, for the cows, whatever, probably testosterone, whatever, I don't know. So you don't want not only the animal hormone, which you're getting into next, You don't want those animal hormones messing up your human hormones, but you also don't want the added hormones that they're adding into the animals. Now you might be thinking, oh, I already choose the animals at the grocery store that don't have added hormones and added antibiotics. That's great. But how often do you go out to eat? And how often do you grab a quick bite here or there, or maybe go for the cheaper option at the store that doesn't say no antibiotics and no hormones? So there's a chance there's a big gap that's potentially you're eating those hormones and those antibiotics. And lastly, we've learned that when the animals are, they're being kept in these situations, to produce meat for us, for major companies
and eggs and dairy
to sell meat, right? And so that's a whole nother thing. But when these animals get executed, they can die in a state of stress, and that stress turns into adrenaline in the body as soon as they're killed, and that adrenaline is also transferred into your body. So I know that this could become like an animal rights, animal activist video, and we do feel for the animals, but we don't want that to get carried away in this podcast. The podcast is about protein coming from, we think starches should be the number one, or if you're choosing animals, and why you might consider not choosing animals anymore. So now it's time to talk about protein. We have reached the part of the podcast when we're talking about protein. And Miss Stephanie, did some research right before. And we also want you to know that we recently watched the Huberman podcast with Gabrielle Lyon, the Huberman podcast with Dr. Mary Claire,
and Dr. Stacy Sims.
So those 3 podcasts on Huberman, on Andrew Huberman, right? Mm-hmm. And so
on YouTube.
We just listened to every word that came out of their mouths in those podcasts. And so that's what inspired this podcast. That's what we are bringing the contrast to those 3 videos, those podcasts, and also have just inspired. Yeah, I think I already covered it. Just why we really want to come in and say what we need to say, because of how many times they said something that triggered us to talk and to understand, and then to now have more information for you.
There's so many factors when it comes to ingesting protein, and what is the outcome goal? The outcome goal is longevity. The outcome goal is healthy skeletal muscle tissue. The outcome goal is for a woman to transition into menopause and out of menopause healthfully and smoothly. The outcome goal is to prevent osteoporosis and fractures in the bones and have healthy muscle tissue and bone health into our later years. The optimal outcome is to have ideal body composition. Mm-hmm. The optimal outcome is to feel well and to have clear skin and to exercise and to resistance train and to recover well. And there's just so many optimal outcomes that rebounding and starches also target. Every single outcome aligned with jumping instead and eating starches instead. So that's where we're just hoping to share our perspective when it comes to getting sufficient protein from starch-based, 90% of our calories coming from starches, and the rest is taken care of.
Did you say 90?
90. I'm saying 90% of our calories coming from carbohydrates such as starches, specifically starches though, because we really want to focus on the quality carbohydrate source, and we can have a blend of refined carbohydrates as well, or refined starches as well as complex starches. But when the diet is composed of mostly starches, some fruits and vegetables, and it's lower in fat, the diet is clean, the diet is healthy, it digests so smoothly, and all the body is just happy and runs efficiently. Pairing it with the resistance training and the sustainability of jumping, accessing all of the benefits of rebounding that never end, getting that skeletal muscle tissue, bone density, health, muscle health,
She's making us
circulation through the body when we jump. Okay, so let me read this. I just gathered this from Dr. John McDougall, and he is an amazing doctor, starch-based doctor that we have been following for the last decade. And so we highly recommend checking out the McDougall program. He's got the book, The Starch Solution, the McDougall program for maximum weight loss, and where we don't actually follow the vegan protocol or the zero oil protocol, we have found a balance with approaching our diets starch-based, starch-focused. We incorporate rebounding as well, and we have found the perfect combo to support our jumping and high active lifestyle because we both have a lot of muscle. So, we're eating sufficient protein, sufficient calories, and we're really shredded from head to toe. And, you'll see this by starting to follow us on social media like Instagram and YouTube here on this channel, as well as Facebook and anywhere else we might be on social media, okay? So here we go. This is what I gathered from Dr. John McDougall. Dietary protein deficiency doesn't exist. No one has a family history of dietary protein deficiency. No one has ever specifically been prescribed protein to solve high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, nor has anyone been cured of these diseases from increasing protein. Never, ever, ever has anyone ever said, I have been prescribed protein to cure high blood pressure, to cure my diabetes. Maybe this is what's being talked about now. Maybe that's what I feel like the vibe is, the trending vibe is that we should be prescribing protein, but it hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's why they're saying that the world is in trouble.
So
our health is in trouble.
They do say to increase proteins to lower blood sugar, but you're saying that they're not prescribing protein to cure diabetes or to reverse diabetes.
Right. And so this
what
message,
are they prescribing?
Pills,
medications.
So
yeah.
the message,
and low carb.
the urgency
Low
to
carb.
eat more protein, it's almost like the urgency is there to basically cure or prevent these diseases, when the optimal outcomes, or what's listed in the optimal outcomes, is what I had suggested before, like body composition and bone health, skeletal muscle tissue health, and all these things, when really we should be going deeper into what's going to cure heart disease, what's going to cure diabetes and obesity. And protein was never something that was, lacking in our menus. So that's what he goes on to say, that dietary protein requirements are so low that scientists in the 1800s knew that you can't even design a menu that's too low in protein, because what we have access to for foods now, and processed foods are included, but what we've been having access to back into the 1800s and beyond, that were grains, potatoes, meat, dairy, fruits, vegetables, legumes, oils, sugars, and processed foods. And you cannot design a diet that doesn't offer sufficient protein, according to the RDA and according to the scientists and Dr. McDougall. And the truth, how much protein we actually need. There is no diet that is deficient in protein. So he goes on to suggest that our basic needs for protein are as low as 3%. But he is also referring to just probably the standard amount that's going to be optimal for, just not necessarily maximum cellular repair and muscle tissue growth, but 3% would be the low. So we're going to go up to 10% or 8 to 10%. Excess protein is not stored in the muscles. It's used for protein synthesis, but it's not stored in the muscles. So it's only used for repairing and rebuilding the muscles. And it's only so much that the muscles can absorb, because really, if you think about it, across the world, all of us that are eating high protein, are those people exclusively like growing more muscle tissue? Apparently not. I mean, this protein movement that's existing now has been going on for the last 20 years.
Sure
and so
has.
we haven't been growing more and more and more
Right.
muscle
Nope.
tissue ever since protein has been started to push. In fact,
No.
we are getting sicker as a society and as a community.
And softer.
Yes, we're getting softer. It's just, well, some of us are. Excess protein is processed through the liver and kidneys and comes out, as she said, expended with energy, stored as fat, or in the urine. And in the process of digesting excess protein, we overwork the liver and the kidneys. We overwork them, creating a condition called acidosis. To neutralize acidosis, our bones begin to dissolve. This leads to osteoporosis, osteopenia, sarcopenia, but more so bone loss, osteoporosis. Our bones are being destroyed by these acids. You know the protein acids that we're referring to, amino acids. Excess amino acid intake is going into our bodies. It's causing stress and kidney stones and is dissolving our bones and causing fragile bones throughout our bodies. It also is causing respiratory problems, cardiovascular issues, muscle weaknesses, impaired nerve function, and metabolic disturbances. So metabolic disturbances where our metabolisms are suffering. They're not the strongest they can be because we're focusing on protein, and that's why we're thinking it's all about the fibrous, starch-based diet that's really going to get that metabolism strong. When the metabolism works efficiently, we're believing that that's when we absorb all the protein we need and it's efficiently absorbed, and then we are really repairing the muscles and we're really building the muscles. And we really get that body composition that we want by eating a lower fat diet, eating a high starch diet. That's when the body composition really goes in our favor. The body gets leaner and the muscles grow, especially with resistance training from jumping. So animal protein is the source of most of our environmental pollution, as most of you know. But animal protein is loaded with pesticides like DDT and so on and so forth. There are so many, and these poisons and chemicals cause autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's disease, Graves' disease, lupus, type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, the resistance to gluten, psoriasis, and eczema. These are skin conditions. These are all autoimmune diseases that are caused by excess protein intake, is the claim we're making. And we are not experiencing any of these things personally, which we have experienced eczema and digestive issues is another one too. And we used to have a lot of digestive trouble. So these conditions are caused by, these autoimmune conditions are caused by a confusion between the animals we eat and the animals that we are. The body gets confused and starts attacking us. So when we ingest these animal proteins, our bodies get confused because we're consuming animals and we are animals, and they're like, it's confusion. Our body gets confused and it starts attacking us rather than attacking the foreign food proteins that we're consuming. So now our health down to on a cellular level, our health is getting compromised meal after meal after meal because our bodies get confused because we're eating animals and we are animals, but we're not supposed to eat the animals. These animal food sources are high in fat and high in cholesterol, which leads to strokes and heart attacks. It also is low in dietary fiber, which she already said, which leads to increased risks of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. Let's focus on protein. Let's get 90 grams or more, or 120 grams, or 150 grams, or 180 grams a day, but it's got zero fiber in it.
We don't like sarcasm, but she led perfectly into the next question is, what are the experts saying about protein?
Well,
what do they say?
I'm almost done. Should I finish or not?
Sure.
Oh, it's just that we don't actually, I was going to say, animals also carry infections. So we are taking a huge gamble. Every time we buy an animal product, fish, chicken, beef, we could get infection. infections from these animals, because they can transfer their infections to us, like salmonella, E. coli, and staph, etc. So some of you have experienced that type of food poisoning or infection just by eating the animals. So yes, we can get high quality sources. We can be ordering online and be thinking this is all easy when it's not. When we're supposed to be eating so many eggs, several dozen eggs a week, and we're just gonna go to the grocery store and get those 350 dozen. These things can cause problem, or the meats too. These things can have infections, like 1 in 100, or probably much more than 1 in 100 will have, could make us sick. So yeah. Oh, and then Dr. McDougall's, this is his theory that high protein diets promote muscle growth by increasing growth hormones like insulin, like growth factor 1. And insulin, like growth factor 1, is similar in structure to insulin, and it plays a crucial role in growth and development, particularly in childhood and adolescence. So insulin, IGH1, helps us to grow, right? So people think protein equals IGH1 equals growth, or IGF1 equals growth of the muscle. Well, actually, that is ultimately, we're at risk because excess growth and growth hormone promotes and accelerates the aging process and interferes with insulin signaling, which leads to insulin resistance, diabetes, obesity, all the things. So there's risks involved with eating excess IGF-1 and protein and fiberless calories.
So what it comes down to is that the diet experts, the protein experts out there, like the 3 women that we mentioned before, Gabrielle Lyon, Stacy Sims, and Mary Claire, they're recommending that we focus on protein. And we think that the reason why they're doing this is because they're studying that protein is a safe focus for wounded people, which we talked about at the beginning, where there's going to be a transition of resistance. The body is going to resist transitioning. So basically why that is because a lot of us are already in a state of confusion, like Stephanie said, and we're not at our best in health. And so when we eat low sugar, low carb, we do have an immediate lower insulin response, but it's not solving the underlying problem. And so if we can make this transition, then we can solve this underlying issue. And so we're thinking that the reason why these doctors are recommending high protein is not only to keep insulin low, but it's also because there's this fear that carbohydrate causes weight gain. And the reason is because carbohydrates are attached to water. And then also when there's confusion in the body and then we eat carbohydrates, the carbohydrates go in and literally put water into your body because they're full of water, which is one of the best things about starches. And so immediately when you eat carbohydrates, you fill out with water. But when you only have carbohydrates in your diet, or primarily you eat a starch-based diet, when you consume carbohydrates at every meal for the primary, for the main food on your plate, then your water, the water attached to it, does what it needs to do and eliminates through the urine.
It hydrates the body.
It hydrates the body. You don't retain that water. And so, again, these 3 women that we're pointing out, well, I can say for sure Mary Claire and Gabrielle. I can't say for sure about Stacy.
Stacy's vegan, apparently.
She is. And so, but more so for these other 2, they're trying to, they're doing their best at recommending a Band-Aid of not letting insulin rise. And I know Gabrielle is very passionate about healthy muscle tissue, which we understand that's very important, but we need to also understand that what we're building our muscles with is either plants or it's animals. And the animals come with so many risks, like she mentioned just now, that we really have to take a good look at how we really want to build our muscle in our body. Do we want our muscle to be made up of all these high risk animal proteins or amino acids, or do we want them to be made with plant amino acids?
And we don't even get a choice when it comes to our health. So our bodies are going to either be in a rejection and end up sick, or they're going to be in an acceptance and end up well. And the choice is ours, and we do have to face a transition, or we just have to be very careful and mindful proceeding and moving forward. If we are going to choose to eat high protein and high fat, we may have to really be really diligent in eating low carbohydrate, because if you have that balance, it's kind of like one or the other. And we're not experts or understanding how it is ultimately beneficial to eat high protein, high fat, low carb, but we're thinking that keeping the carbs low, you're going to be better off than being potentially in a little bit of a wave with your carbs, just eating more or less carbs and noticing that when you eat carbs, you have all these negative symptoms, and then when you are strict and you can keep them out of the menu, you feel good. You might have to be a little bit more disciplined in order to keep those undesired symptoms at bay.
So, very good points. And also, I wrote down here, what do the experts say about protein? They say focus on it. They say eat a percentage like 0.7 up to 1.4 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and it's of ideal body weight. And so they also, we talked about this at the beginning. I don't know if you mentioned it, but for 120 pound ideal body weight for a 5'7" frame. Now maybe women are not as tall as that, and so there are some that are taller, but maybe your average person could be hitting around 100 grams of protein or whatnot. And I'm actually digressing because I just wanted to cover what the experts are saying. What are we doing? We're eating more around half that, about 50 grams of protein, because we have no need for any excess protein to go to any energy. We have no need for any excess protein to be stored as fat, because we're not glucose deficient. When you're glucose deficient, that is when some of your proteins get stored as fat and some of your proteins get used as energy. So we don't even need extra protein. So, and it can go into more,
Is it an inefficient conversion to energy, to convert proteins to energy?
Very, very.
It's not as efficient as glucose. It's just easy for glucose to turn to energy.
It's very thermogenic. It brings so much heat into the body because of how much energy it takes to turn protein into energy.
So that's one thing too with the protein is thermic effect.
Yes.
That's like kind of an angle that's used in the protein movement. It's that eat more protein and your body will work harder to burn more calories, which the outcomes we talked about, but the outcome would be that you're eating closer to your ideal calorie consumption, if not eating in a calorie deficit. There's these things, these angles at which are like, oh, eat more protein and well, I was going to say something actually else too. We talk about satiation from protein. These strategies of trying to get us to be in a calorie deficit, and that's just missing the point completely.
I want to make a really big point right now, and that is, what are these women that are protein experts, what are they not saying? And we really need to consider that. Why is it that they're coming in and they're talking so much about protein when the primary fuel source for the body is glucose, but they don't have much to say about that?
If anything.
They really have no idea how much glucose that our body needs. And that should be right there a red flag, because we need to understand the most important nutrient that we should be consuming in our body and our needs for it. And so we want you to know that when you focus on a starch-based diet, you're focusing on your body's primary fuel source. And so then, because all starches have proteins in them, you really can sit back and enjoy the starch ride of your life, because all the questions are answered. You don't have to worry about your proteins. You don't have to track your proteins. You don't have to track anything on Chronometer. You don't have to track your calories. You just have to eat until you're satisfied, and you have to stay hydrated, and you have to nose breathe, and you have to jump instead. We're literally
You don't
giving
have
you
to jump instead. You can lift
we're
weights.
giving you the foundation. Well, okay, but we're
Just
giving.
saying.
We are so going to change your mind about that. But we are getting into giving your body the tools that it needs to build a trophy body, and it's like a hammer and a screwdriver and
Wood.
a towel, and wood and a nail, and you got it. You got it. You can build your house, right? But unfortunately, the protein experts are only giving you a straw. And so you can't build a house with that. They're not getting the importance of glucose for your brain. Notice too, we follow Gabrielle Lyon. We love her. She's beautiful and she's smart. But when we watch her in her podcasts and we follow her on Instagram, she is not as clear and focused as she could be. And she is very open about that, how there's a little bit of dishevelment in her life. She even talked about in the Huberman podcast how she was just visiting Huberman for a day or two, and she packed for 4 or 5 days of food and in our thinking, if you have that glucose to your brain, you know exactly what you need. You're very focused. You're very present. Instead of packing for a whole week for 2 days, possibly, not being as focused as you could be she manages her life. She is a doctor. She's smart. She's beautiful. She runs her Instagram. She is doing her thing. But we're just noticing that glucose is not her primary fuel in her brain, and we can sense it. Now, there's no judgments. I feel bad even mentioning it, but the fact is that glucose needs to be prioritized. It is the foundation of our health, and we absolutely cannot be ignoring that, or else we will end up with all of those issues that she mentioned earlier. And I wanted to ask you, of all those things that she mentioned, the heart disease, the cancer, the diabetes, all of the different eczema and dementia and things like that. How many of you experience any of those things or know someone that's experiencing those things? It really hits home when we realize that this is real life and these diseases are real. And we don't want to be struggling with them. We see people online that have eczema on their bodies, and we feel so much for them. Diabetes, scary diagnosis. Heart disease, scary diagnosis. Cancer, scary diagnosis. So we really, really need to take this seriously and consider switching to a starch-based diet.
This is what our video looks like right now.
I wonder if it's because I was talking about it.
Yeah. We might be getting a disruption in our live stream.
Okay, so we're going to keep going as we're not getting it. So the dangers of animal protein she mentioned, and so we don't need to go to that. But I did want to add that when we eat animal protein, it's often connected to fat, because animal proteins, you can get the non-fat dairy options and you can get the lean meats, but oftentimes animal proteins are connected to fats. And that's a lot of excess calories that we don't need to be consuming. Fat is easily stored as fat. And so do you want fat on your body? You don't want to have those stored fats coming from animal fats, because they're storing in your muscles as well. And when they store in your muscles, then your muscles are fattier. They're not healthier. So we want that lean muscle tissue that comes from eating starches.
The proteins
are lean.
They talked about on the podcast, they talked about muscle is actually can absorb fat and be fatty. And so we just thought, well, then it just doesn't really add up to be eating a high protein menu, which really is a higher fat menu. And then ultimately we are putting that fat and storing the fat even into the muscle tissue, which prevents that skeletal muscle tissue health that we really want. We ultimately want really flexible muscle tissue. We want it to be circulating. We want it to be absorbing the nutrients. And when it's maybe just slightly broken down or even more so broken down, we want it to repair efficiently and grow. And ultimately, we don't want it to be inflexible and and stiff. We want it to be open and flexible. So having that fat tissue in there is really, it's the organ, right? We know what it really is to have fat stored in the organ. It's critical. It's critical for our health.
And okay, so I'm gonna just finish this, and then I'll let Steph take over on what happens when we don't meet our glucose needs, because we've already covered it, but it's very important to understand that we all have glucose needs, just like we hear how important our protein needs are. Well, we have glucose needs, and I can't wait for her to get into that, but I do want to mention really quick that you might be wondering about starches and proteins. Maybe you're thinking, can I eat starches? Can I start eating the starches? I'm really excited about that. I feel that excitement for you. You want to put the mashed potatoes on your plate, you want to put the bread on your plate, and you want to enjoy it. Can I also have some protein on my plate? Because I just feel like it's going to make me enjoy my starches more, and it's going to make me feel more satiated. And I do want to mention that, just so you have this awareness and it's logged in this video, that starches and proteins require a different digestion. So just so you know, proteins need an acidic environment in the stomach for proper digestion. So proteins require an acidic digestion. And then starches, it says here, are primarily digested in the small intestine after being broken down in the mouth with enzymes like amylase, which works best in a more neutral or alkaline environment. So to sum it up, starches need an alkaline stomach and proteins need an acidic stomach. So if you combine the two, your baked potato and your protein, just know that you are causing two different digestive stomach requirements in order to break that down, which could cause indigestion, confusion, and potentially just slower breakdown of your food. So now we've got slower assimilation, slower elimination, potentially, this would be making claims, but potentially more insulin response, because we've got a slower digestion happening, and we need that food to break down to glucose to get to the brain and the muscles. So now it's not happening as quickly. That might be a step earlier than the digestive breakdown of these foods, but just to keep that in mind, we're here to recommend that you eat starches and starches only, along with fruits and vegetables. And you will have optimal health inside and out. And your life will transform because of how sharp your brain will be, how energized you'll be. Oh, I can't wait to get into all that. That's coming up very soon. All the good things that come.
Well, I wanted to touch on what you said about efficiency and just having that be the goal, because with packing extra food and being over prepared, that could ultimately just be like a personality trait, just something coming from the past. I like to prepare and make sure I'm ready. And but ultimately, we're thinking that we want efficiency in our bodies and out in our lives, and that's just our personal preference or goal in life. And when it comes to the starch-based approach and jumping approach, it's just so amazingly sustainable. Let's talk about packing lunches for on a starch-based diet versus on a high protein diet. It just seems like we only are gathering instances and examples of people who struggle to get that protein. It's always a struggle to get those high grams, 30 grams ish of protein 3 times a day or 4 times a day, up to 50 grams 3 times a day. It's so hard, and it's not when traveling and when working a full-time job or even having a family, it's almost impossible to sustain that. And doing that efficiently is really not easy world, as we like to say. And so that plays a role. It's like our lifestyle and having a happy, healthy life that just feels easy and comfortable and kind of goes with the flow. It just doesn't seem like on that end, on that aspect, doesn't seem like protein fits that. It doesn't seem like protein is an easy approach with fueling our bodies. And I am going to actually let you talk about the what happens when we don't meet our glucose needs, because I did want to say something else about satiation. I just have to say it. It's on my heart.
Do.
It's on my heart to talk about protein satiation. When it comes to it, I think one of the angles that's used for protein, eating protein as a focus, is that we will have a blunt in our hunger, and we will be held over longer. And intermittent fasting is a huge topic too in the community. And that would be for those who are intermittent fasting, the goal would be to get into a calorie deficit or to be in a calorie range that keeps our body composition optimal. And the angle of that protein is causing better satiation and helps us to be fuller longer. That is a strategy, and I can understand that strategy, and it's a very powerful statement. We want to be full. One of our favorite things on the planet is to eat and feel full. But ultimately, as we've been talking about having a glucose need in our bodies, what that satiation does from the protein is ultimately it shifts our connection to our own hunger and satiation cues, our natural hunger and satiation cues that we learn we need from our starches. So we have hunger and satiation connected to our starch or our glucose needs. This is just how our bodies run. We want to connect to those hunger and satiation cues, and it's almost we're desperately needing to connect to those. In order for us to all be a healthy weight, it might be one of the main causes of being overweight or obese is that we are not connecting to our true hunger and satiation cues. So when these protein guidelines are so high and these protein recommendations come in and suggest that we blunt our hunger and we stuff protein to the point where we're not hungry, this is a total disruption of our internal connections to our satiation and hunger signals that we need to be connecting to more importantly than anything else in order to be energetic, to be healthy, to work out, to recover, to grow muscle, to have happy, healthy hormones, and to be that optimal body weight. So that there's a transition when we go from eating a high protein diet to a higher starch diet. There's a transition, and we would love to help and support, and even if I could just say it right now, just how do we connect? What are the sensations of hunger and fullness? And I'll say for hunger, it comes down to that food becomes becomes a necessity in your mind. Just like you thinking about food, it can be just from like focusing on work, and then all of a sudden the idea of food is coming in. This could be a very easy signal to detect that it really truly is time to put something in the body. It may be water, and drinking some water right in that moment is probably the best option, just to know for sure if it was actually a water signal or if it was a hunger signal. And then connecting to what could happen next, which would be a stronger desire or urge to eat, or it's maybe the clock helps you to understand when your next meal is coming in. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to wait too long past those initial signals. This is how we align with proper feeding, is how we align with it. When we really start to connect and understand those signals, those hunger signals, when we first start to feel those hunger signals, that is when we should start to put water or food into our bodies. This is helping us connect to our proper calorie intake.
Water for sure.
And water and hydration. And when we are hitting those proper calorie amounts, we really start to lose weight. It's the one thing stopping us from shedding weight and keeping the weight off. It's this disruption with our hunger satiation.
Yes.
So there's,
that carries on through the day.
Yeah. And there are so many other signals that we can learn and understand. I would just, dare I say, Google it. What are the typical symptoms of hunger? And we need to get to know those and understand them and be aware and connect to them. And that's part of happiness too, is that you could notice a total crash just by pushing off hunger for that 30 extra minutes. Intermittent fasting can be very beneficial, and we're not here to discount the benefits of intermittent fasting, but intermittent fasting can interfere with those hunger satiation signals. Maybe we are aware, or we're connected to those hunger satiation signals, and we're choosing to fast for other reasons. We can support that and understand that. But if intermittent fasting is not part of your lifestyle and you want to really hone in on your proper hunger and satiation cues, it's going to really face you with your emotional connection with food, your past, all these things are involved. So there's hunger signals, and then there's satiation signals. And she and I help each other learn what is a satiation signal. There's very subtle satiation signals. One thing you want to do is try not, when you're eating, be more respectful of the food getting a chew or two.
Yeah.
And that's just me talking to, myself, when even if I'm having a bite of potato or rice or bread, it's just too easy to swallow the whole bite pretty quickly. And now I'm not saying to chew and just keep chewing, but you owe it to that bite to give it a couple chomps. This is so beneficial, and this is a new strategy and habit that you need to start implementing if you want to connect to your satiation signals. So connecting to chewing better. Put a note up on your dining room wall, whatever, that says chew your food. Just do something that's going to help you. And maybe you're a chew master and you don't need your note. But this is definitely for most of us out there, including me, myself. So when it comes to those signals that we're ready to be done eating, I want you to notice that toward the end of your meal, or toward, I guess your portions, they're going to change, especially if you do decide to transition to a starch-based diet. When you are eating mindfully and chewing a bit better and connecting to a more respectful approach to food, maybe not as distracted. It's so hard for me to not be on my phone and not be on the computer, on the screen when I eat. There should be some moments in the week where I'm not. There should be. Eat outside. Try eating outside. Try doing it, just try changing it up a little bit. Our minds get so busy when we eat. We can all just probably raise our hands and say, I know why I'm overweight. It's because I do not pay attention to anything when I'm eating except for the TV or busyness in my mind. So I just wanted to point out a couple things toward the end of the meal. One thing that happens sometimes when I'm eating, I could be, let's say I'm eating a sandwich just to make it easy, and I'm chewing, and then all of a sudden,
What kind of sandwich?
Yeah, let's call it,
Why not just say it was something you actually eat?
well, just to make it easy, okay, we do like sandwiches. I like some margarine and jam, or margarine and sugar. Yes, that's what we're eating.
I don't have those sandwiches.
Or a little bit of peanut butter and jam, or peanut butter and sugar.
You have a butter sugar sandwich?
Well, 2 slices of bread at once, yes. So, toward the end of the meal, satiation signals. These are not that easy to detect. A lot of us are going to be way too full before that moment, the moment that was 10 bites ago when we needed to stop. So that 10 bites ago, that's the moment I'm talking about. Okay? So what you want to do is be aware, and that's what we want to make you aware of. There will be a mental shift, especially when you're eating kind of less distracted, but there will be a mental to taste bud shift where you'll be eating, and then all of a sudden the meal you're eating, it just clicks into doesn't sound good anymore. It's like you lose interest. There's just a little shift of interest lost. Put the food down for 10 minutes. You will be shocked at potentially that you are totally satisfied. And there's that mental distaste, but it loses interest. It just doesn't sound good. And that's because when you started getting the food sounds good thoughts, that's when your body was saying, I need to eat. And then when you're toward the end of the meal and that one moment shifts, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Once you get aware of that, it doesn't have to be like the bite before that moment happens. Let yourself have that one more bite if you need it, but you'll start to get it stronger and stronger and connect to that. And when you feel that connection of this, you lose interest, that is when you stop eating. And when you get to that point where each meal is connected to that proper hunger and satiation, that's when you're gonna achieve weight loss, and you're gonna have a way higher chances of getting to your ideal body weight. And when it comes to protein recommendations, if you are fixed on consuming 30 to 50 grams of protein and it has no regard to your hunger and satiation cues, that will be an impossible journey of trying to get down to your weight, to your ideal weight. And the only other thing I'll say is that when we're focused on protein and we're needing glucose or carbohydrates and we're eating too much protein, this to me spells like, dare I say, eating disorder, where we're kind of in this like maybe kind of hunger overeating wave because of the blunt in our hunger.
Disordered eating. Not eating disorder.
Okay. Yeah. But because of the blunt in our hunger, we're like feeling empowered and we're feeling hungry or, satisfied, but we're not feeling heavy because there's not a lot of food volume in our stomachs. But then it's just too easy to all of a sudden have the body's going to, without a doubt, it's going to all of a sudden shovel the need for carbohydrates. Your actual body's need for carbohydrates is going to come in like a train. Mm-hmm. And then that's when you do the overeat thing, and then the undereating thing, and the overeating thing. And so just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you are eating a protein diet, if that's what you choose, or if you're ultimately transitioning or eating a starch-based diet. There are ways to connect to the proper intake of starches, because we're not going from, no matter what diet you're eating, you shouldn't be just in this like all you can eat, like stuff yourself. That's never going to be an answer for having optimal relationship with food. That's the end of that.
Wonderful. Well, I want to but just reassure you that when we start to eat our starch-based diet in that hormonal flow, that healthy hormonal flow, because we're jumping instead and we're nose breathing and we're staying hydrated, everything that she just said comes super easy. Okay. So,
the detecting hunger and satiation, it comes easier and easier and easier. But even I still struggle because I eat distracted. It doesn't just happen
but when you eat distracted and you overeat, you immediately feel unwell. And then you learn from that. But a lot of us that aren't overeating, we're not necessarily even knowing that we're feeling unwell. We all of a sudden just are in a bad mood, or we just notice that, we're craving.
I used to just pick up the rug and brush the unwell, and I would just feel unhappy instead.
I'm certain that
She and I actually have a different relationship with food. One thing too we can do is, if we do end up feeling a little too full and overeating, we got our Rebounders. We can get on there and we can do some gentle health bounce or stepping around in order to help our bodies digest.
I'm loving the comments, by the way. I see all you. I love this. I want to tell you what's to come in the podcast, because I don't want to rush the end. We have been going for over an hour 15.
Let's do it.
What I wanted to do was cover first what happens when we don't meet our glucose needs, and then do we need less protein if we're doing less tearing down of the muscles? Because Stephanie and I have built these beautiful muscles, flexible, healthy muscles inside and out of our bodies, and we've been doing it with all gravity training. No excess weight on muscles that has caused tearing of the muscles to the point of needing potentially more protein. So I want to talk about that briefly. I have a segment or a section here of what do we eat, so you know exactly what we eat. And then what about fat and sugar? I saw that in the comments.
And
just
organic
about fats.
starches. I saw that in the comments too. Do we eat organic starches?
Okay, we'll cover that. And then how do we feel running primarily on glucose? I have the list. I could tell you verbatim or, off the cuff exactly how we feel, but I want to make sure that I hit all of these things. And then what do we recommend for you? So let's go ahead quick, cover these topics because these are all important and they're all interesting and we want you to get all the information that you need. So first of all, what happens when we don't meet our glucose needs? I researched this and I already know from personal experience when I don't meet my glucose needs that I don't feel well and I don't feel energized and I'm not in a good mood. But specifically here, it says low energy levels. That's the very first thing. Brain fog, basically the second thing that I just said. The mood changes. Increased cravings. So basically, if you're driving a car and you don't have enough gas, your car is going to put, put, put. It's going to be foggy and you're not going to be able to have that performance and have that energy that you need. And rest assured, when you're carb adapted, you are eating your carbs and you're living your normal, healthy, hormonally balanced life. Carbohydrates, starches specifically, which we're talking about, are made up of starch, which turns to fuel, water, which keeps your system hydrated, fiber, which pushes the food through your body and keeps your colon healthy, and then micronutrients. And then a little bit of protein for the amino acids to rebuild muscle, and then just enough fat to feed your body the fat it needs. But we like to have fat, and we're going to talk about fat and sugar here. But the point is that there's, rest assured, those carbohydrates that you eat, you will not have to be in fear that any of them will be stored as fat. Just look at us, okay? And we're constantly putting carbohydrates in the form of starches into our bodies. And as we do eat less distracted and we find ourselves more and more practiced with this, then we find that balance day in and day out. And it also has to do with our hormones through the month as women that have their cycle and that are going into menopause. And then the presence needs to become highest priority when we're eating in menopause, during our menopause, just because we're all over the place in menopause. And that's just part of the transition into becoming, out of menopause. And so back on track here. A lot goes on when we're glucose deficient, when we're glucose deprived. Hormonal imbalances. We're not getting what we need to be healthy, so our hormones are imbalanced. And again, this is the biggest part of not reaching your trophy body, of not feeling your best, of having weight gain in your stomach all of a sudden when you're going into menopause. And when you have menopause, all of a sudden you get unwanted belly fat, and it's potentially because all these years Gabrielle Lyon has been telling you to stay focused on protein and not stay focused on glucose. And I'm saying this because it's so critical. It's critical. Okay, so impaired recovery. You're here to build your body. So many of you are training so hard in the gym, just like Gabrielle Lyon, who is lifting those weights and who is pushing her body. You follow her on Instagram, you'll see it for yourself. If you're glucose deprived, glucose deficient, you have impaired recovery, which means you're not even recovering those muscles. And so you must be glucose efficient. You must what's the opposite of deficient? You must hit your glucose needs.
Because glucose doesn't repair, because that's what they're saying, is that high protein will repair the muscle. So they're saying that you're saying glucose in its sufficiency will repair muscle with that equally, but without the glucose present, then this high protein won't do the same job repairing or recovering muscles as will glucose.
Enough glucose keeps your immune system strong, and having that strength in your immune system helps you to stay healthy in all of your functionings in your body, keeps all of your organs healthy. And if you're under glucose, then immediately your organs aren't getting everything that they need, and that includes your muscles, and therefore the energy that you could be putting towards recovery and putting towards repairing your muscles, and because it's amino acids build do build the muscles, but glucose plays a role in it. I can't tell you exactly how, but I know that glucose plays a role, and having that sufficient glucose, keeping the hormones balanced, keeping the organs healthy, it all plays a role in how efficient your protein is moved through your body and used. And so it all comes down to having that substantial foundation of health from meeting your glucose needs. Not being deficient in glucose.
Like a baby needs its milk or formula. If we give it plenty, then that's a happy baby.
I wrote it down here. So
if we give it less, half of what it needs, that's an unhappy baby. It's gonna the domino effect of depression and sadness and sickness and potentially for this baby. It's like the baby needs to be fully sufficient in milk. We need to be fully
growing
sufficient
babies
in
probably
our
need more
glucose.
protein, but
That's not what I
different.
mean. It's
I
just
know.
a metaphor for getting meeting our needs.
A few more things. So I did write this down here. When we are glucose deficient, turned into glucose for energy. Proteins are turned into glucose for energy, which means your muscles aren't getting the protein to rebuild. So that's what's happening, is when you're glucose deficient, your proteins that you're eating are now coming in and replacing that protein.
I don't want to necessarily repair muscle. It's more important that I convert to energy, because I need energy for the organ health and for the skin health and for the all the things.
And there is
it won't necessarily
no
be
energy in protein. There's no energy in protein.
Of protein synthesis.
And then I wrote here also, it's stored as fat. So if your body is in famine because it is not getting enough glucose, then when you eat the excess protein will store as fat, because it's assuming that you are in need of fuel, and therefore its survival mechanism is to store
it's going to prepare
the
for
protein as fat.
It's going to prepare for
and as energy and to repair muscle, but only a smaller percentage of that protein is repairing your muscle.
It's preparing for insufficient amounts of energy. Preparing by storing energy, storing fat,
And protein doesn't have a fiber attached to it. And protein doesn't
muscle.
have water attached to it. And protein most of the time is animal. And we've already covered that. What about plant proteins? Well, there's beans. We're all about beans. Eat your legumes. Beans are phenomenal. And then there's tofu. How many of us like tofu? Maybe you like tofu, but the only reason you like tofu is because you're saucing it up. And that's fine. We sauce up our starches, no problem. But tofu, ultimately, it doesn't have any fiber. Again, it's another plant that doesn't have fiber. So it's a personal preference at that point. If you're having a belief that you need the protein, because we follow some Instagrammers that load up on the tofu. But again, I wanted to go into, do we need less protein if we're doing less tearing down of the muscles? So if we're resistance training on our rebounders and we're not tearing our muscles down as much, you don't ever have to eat protein. I'm sorry, tofu. You never have to eat tofu. Don't force it. Don't force it. Eat beans.
Just feel.
Who loves burritos?
Feel the way that those starches
Taco
digest.
Del Mar.
You might notice the difference between the way that the starches digest, like cereal and bread, versus tofu. It's a difference, and you might prefer the.
What's the burrito place up the street?
Chipotle?
Chipotle. We do not endorse Chipotle. Chipotle, the rice has hard chunks of rice, and at least ours does. They do have the brown option, but it's it's undercooked. And then
whoa.
They only have one tortilla, and it's dry and it's white.
We're grateful.
Taco Del Mar has whole wheat.
And some of you have no idea what we're talking about.
Okay, so
if you go to a fast food burrito place, just know
I bet she wants
there
to
might
talk
be a
about
lot
what
of
we
that.
What do we eat?
Oh, I would love to talk about what we eat.
Talk
Well,
about it.
we've been through it with the starch-based menu, and we've kind of tried it all with the whole starch approach, or like a higher fruit approach, and ultimately we've come to the conclusion that our satisfaction meets jumping needs and muscle needs.
What do we eat?
Meets sustaintainability,
We've
meets
tried it
the
all.
ultimate diet perfection. and that is we base our starch, our preferred starches are cereals, predominantly whole grain cereals, bread, predominantly whole grain bread, potatoes of all varieties. Rice, we do like a cut of white rice and quinoa. It's like a 25 quinoa, 75 white rice. This is just how we prepare our white rice, simply because we feel it just kind of fills out that white rice. White rice is super fast. And so we just pour, say, a quarter cup of quinoa and 3/4 cup of white rice in our rice cooker. And that would be 1 cup, for instance. It's a 3/4 cup. I'm not trying to confuse you, but just use the same water level as you would white rice, and do your own desired proportions of white rice to quinoa. And that's the white rice quinoa we use. So brown rice is cool and all, but it's harder to flavor. It seems like white rice, no one hates white rice. We are in that group. We love white rice, and we cut it with quinoa, and we have this favorite teriyaki. I'll just slip that in there. The Hawaiian barbecue sauce, we found it in Hawaii, and it's a teriyaki sauce, and it's fabulous. So
Get on Amazon.
whole grain cereal, whole grain breads, and potatoes, sweet and white, and rice and beans. This would be our 5 top starches. Pasta is also on the menu once in a while. Definitely corn tortillas or regular flour tortillas. Awesome, awesome. And I might be missing a few that we sometimes gravitate towards, but we are predominantly eating these cereals, breads. Oh, we do incorporate a daily cereal bar. Is it usually a go-to, because there's always that moment, whether it be with our coffee or a snack at some point, where that cereal bar, like a Nutri-Grain bar,
Which
just
has
like
dairy.
it does have a bit of milk. So we're not vegan. We do have the little sprinkles of this and that, because we're living our best life, and we're not getting tied up in
Sometimes pick your battles.
Yeah, we're not getting tied up in rules. We're just starch focused, and we noticed, and we just have really observed our digestion, energy levels.
What happens when we do
our
eat
relationship with food, our satiation. We get pimples when we might get a pimple that's just like happens right after, but
Yeah, sometimes
it's
I'll
not
splurge on-
consistent. We're not sticklers. We will still
No.
have it here or
Yes.
there. Life
Yes.
goes on. We have alcohol once in a while. But we do have the cereal bar, and for other bars that we will include, like Cliff Bars or a Builder's Bar or Fig Newtons or like Nature's Bakery bars. Basically, it's just like have a bar when you want a bar, and we get kind of dialed into what we like and what feels good, and then we'll have our little veggies and fruits, and we'll kind of go in waves with it, and we don't count servings or anything like that.
Why do we only have a little bit of fruit and veg?
Well, we just noticed that
False satiation.
actually when it comes to fruit, we've navigated that in the month when we kind of do a little bit of a cycle sync, which we are 40 this year. We were born in 84, and all of what we're saying here, this starch-based menu, it actually kind of has a flow too, an intake flow throughout the month. It also has an intake flow as we are connected not only to satiation and hunger, but to our salt and sweet detection and needs. And we can sometimes know right away in a meal, in an approach to eating, we can tell, do we need a more savory meal or do we need a sweet meal? And boy, oh boy, when you connect to that need right there, should I be eating a sweet or savory? When you connect to that,
that's
food
big.
never tastes better.
Yeah.
The food digests better. You are more connected to satiation and hunger and your true hunger. And you may even choose something that you wouldn't normally just typically eat, like without even thinking, I'm just going to eat that for breakfast. And more so, it's like, wow, I need salt and I would prefer this starch. And our needs really start to get met when we connect to these things. So our menu, as she said, has minimal fruits and vegetables because we are connecting to our fruit and veggie needs. Fruit and veggies is kind of happening when we feel like we need that water or the lightness from fruit, which may be like 1 or 2 servings, maybe several days in a row, and then we're like, whoa. No, I need now. It's like we can just, it's one day at a time and it just flows. And then same with vegetables. There might be several meals in a week that have some broccoli, a steamed broccoli, or some steamed zucchini, or whatever.
We have to be careful though, because of that false sense of satiation.
Right. It doesn't matter which vegetable we're consuming, just a little bit of this and that. But there are lots of meals in the month that we are just no veggie on the plate and no fruit.
Except potato, starchy vegetable.
Yeah,
That's starch
we're
for
not
us.
trying to be malnourished. That's not it. Or it's more so that we just need to connect.
After
What if
all
we
that
want
glucose
100% of our
talk.
plate coming from starches? That's really important.
Yeah.
That we do that. It's like if we need the plate to be diluted with some calories and vegetables, we need that. If we need to not have it be diluted, we need to not put the veggies on our plate. So it's strategic, and it's really some of the plant-based or starch-based community really focuses on a certain percentage of their plate coming from vegetables.
Good point.
And just beware that the digestion is talking to us. We need to get to know it. We need to translate it. Our mind to digestion. It's the biggest role that it plays in our health. It's our connections and our understanding of our needs. And I'm learning my needs too. I'm not the 10-year expert, and I've been doing this. I will be. At 50 years old, I'll be the 10-year expert.
Wait, you're already 10 years in.
What I'm saying is when it comes to connecting, being aware of my needs, being aware.
You're 10 years of being expert.
Having narrowed it down to my favorite starches, that took time. Having narrowed it down to my favorite toppings on my starches, that took time. Having understood and becoming aware of my heart satiation and hunger, that takes time. Having been aware and understood my salt and savory detection, that took time. We helped each other. We observed each other, and we learned so much from each other. So really, we're not one person teaching you something. We are two people teaching you maybe even a yin and yang kind of perception from this whole lifestyle. And we're always navigating from kind of an opposite but identical perspective. And that's how we actually teach our workouts on the jumpers, on the rebounders. We are both instructing, and we offer that really unique instruction where both of us come in with different dialogues, different perspectives, different approaches, and we rule.
Absolutely. So, question came through on in the comments, and I'm going to address that. Also, what about fat and sugar? And so I'll quick say that we have gone in phases of increasing, decreasing fats, which relates to the answer to the question that came in the comments section.
I didn't mention the toppings, so that's good because that's part of our menu, a big part of our menu.
Yes, and then sugar as well. And so we've gone in phases of consuming a lot of sugar and consuming no sugar. And so what we've concluded is that starches need to stay right here. This is the starch focus right here. And we can notice that as we start to make our meals, are we leaning into the focus being the topping on the starch, or are we focusing on the starches? And what we ended up concluding was we're not going to be eating, we love spread on our bread, and we're not going to be eating dairy butter. So we found country crock, and that makes the bread so delicious. It gives us that extra, flavor that makes us enjoy the starch. So that's what we use for our bread.
It's margarine.
It's a fat. It's a margarine. And then we put brown sugar on it too, because that's a really nice complement to the butter on the bread. Now, I've just given you one example. When it comes to potatoes, for example, we just like barbecue sauce. But what it concludes is that
seasonings.
When it comes to fats and sugars and any seasonings for that matter, we need to use them as a means to get the starch down and to enjoy the starch and make sure that starch stays the focus and not the topping. And if at the beginning, when we are transitioning to a starch-based diet, if the topping is the focus, it's okay. There could be excitement, you're now allowing yourself to have starch and butter with no guilt, and you're wanting to just enjoy it. But know that at the end of the day, you're going to be very in tune with, let's just give you this, the idea of what it looks like on the other side of the rainbow when you're really adapted and you're feeling really well. When you load up on the fat and on the sugar on your starches, it will change how you're feeling, potentially for the negative. So That's why we don't even have peanut butter as much, and if we do, it's a very light spread, because if we have too much, we feel that dip right after we eat, and we sometimes get moody. Like, I'll look over and I'll be like, uh-oh, the mood's coming out. Or it's coming out on me. If I am piling sugar onto a meal, it can also make me feel a little bit like high afterward, and then I can drop. But when we keep the sugars and the fats and the condiments to taste, then, and we jump for that digestive strength, we notice that we feel that balance, and we start to really understand what works and what doesn't work. And again, that's what I was saying before, it comes naturally, and it's okay to go through the transition, but really allow it all, because at the end of the day, we cannot be bringing the stress into our body about what we should be, or specifics like that, including GMO and organic. I want to tell you that you should focus on non-GMO and focus on organic only. But the problem is that it can become non-easy world to always be so focused on that. If it comes naturally to you and it's easy for you and you have the means and the money to spend the extra few dollars per starch that you're buying that's organic, then that's totally fine and acceptable. I'm not telling you not to do that. It's just a matter of understanding that your body's primary needs are glucose. And if you're filling your body with glucose, I'm thinking that your body is going to burn off anything that doesn't assist it, that doesn't help it. And that could be excess GMOs, non-organic. We are not having any health issues with following a starch-based diet and not following a strictly non-GMO, organic only, or we're staying focused on allowing condiments to taste, but we've just noticed that our digestions are flawless when we keep the spreads and sugars light, because again, the starch is the focus. So it all evolves and happens. And so now I want to answer the question in here: how were we eating when we lost the initial weight versus now? Were we eating differently then versus now? And we talked about this recently, and then you can get into this next, how we feel running on primarily on glucose. But I want to say that when we were eating back, when we first started following the McDougall program for maximum weight loss, which is the diet we were following when we lost 15 pounds in 15 weeks. Before that, we lost 25 pounds, but that was over 3 years because we were coming down from consuming.
The first year we switched to starches, we lost 25 pounds.
And then we
plateaued. And then we lost about 25 pounds in 6 months.
It was 25 pounds again.
15 of those pounds in 15 weeks, but a total of 25 pounds in 6 months.
So we were following the McDougall program for a maximum weight loss, and we were focusing on cucumber and oatmeal for breakfast, sweet potato and iceberg lettuce for lunch, broccoli and brown rice for dinner.
With necessary toppings.
Yes.
All included.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So, but what I want you to know is that when we lost that weight, we actually got too lean. And it wasn't like, oh, we were lean. We were underweight. We were malnourished.
We didn't have that cushion that we need in order to have just the
we
right
look so much
healthy
better
body
now.
fat.
We look so much better now. We have more muscle. We have more stability in our brains. I'm going to say too, because I am telling you exactly how it is. When we were following the McDougall program for maximum weight loss, which is no animal products whatsoever, no oil at all, and just super clean, like I said, just with a vegetable. We were having the cucumber as a fruit technically with the oatmeal, and the iceberg lettuce with the sweet potato, and the veg, the broccoli with the brown rice.
With toppings.
Basically. But that was the foundation of the meal, and it was always a veg with the starch.
It was more strict. It was more focused on veggies.
It was very strict, very focused. We had blood sugar issues. I did not have a strong sex drive. And that's a part of hormonal health. So I'm just keeping it real here. There were things that were missing, holes in the diet, holes in our health.
And maybe that's because we were jumping instead, and we were hitting such efficiency with our muscle gains and our exercise that our bodies demanded that we expand on that menu. And that menu was strictly designed for those who are in a desperate need of shifting their health for the better, like middle age, I'm in a crisis, I'm in a health crisis. McDougall and his team and drmcdougall.com has so many amazing resources. You need to check it out. All their content is free too. Almost all of their content is free. They have menu plans and it's absolutely amazing. You need to check them out for sure. But their menu is on the strict side, and so we had to find our balance with that. We actually did, like she said, got a little lean, and then we did end up gaining 10 of those pounds back because our minds and our lifestyles.
I went from 125 to 130. Oh. At my lowest, I was 125, and then I went back up to 130 as soon as I filled in the edges.
I'm talking about the summer that we went all in and put
that did not count. That does not even count.
That was a natural choice because of what we had been through and what we needed in order to balance it out. Extremes on the menu journey always
completely forgot about that whole period of time.
With a little bit of a balance.
That was because of the bodybuilding thing.
So balance, we brought that balance into our starch-based diet, and that's why we do the margarine. Yes, we are admitting that the 100. Seed oils and the palm oils in margarine, there's a lot to say about those things, and we're not disregarding that those things are unhealthy. But
I know it's not an excuse, but we're healthy. I can't wait to get into how we're feeling.
I did want to say
on glucose.
I wanted to say I had an experience where I was feeding someone Five Guys, and I was eating bread with some margarine and jam, and I was like, which meal here looks like the meal that's going to keep me in optimal health? The bread, the whole grain bread with a light spread of margarine and some jam, or Five Guys? And I'm like, okay, that's when we compare these two meals, we got the bread just on point. That's the beautiful pinnacle of health.
It's got a halo
meal in our eyes. But when we compare, sometimes we'll go into our past. When we compare bread and margarine and jam to brown rice and broccoli and a little sprinkle of teriyaki sauce,
we're gonna get beat up about that.
We might get some flack for that. Bread and margarine and jam is not a whole food. It's processed. It's quick digesting. It's all these things, And ultimately, we found that balance, and we live our best.
All coming up in my ebook,
and it really, really comes.
I just want you to have everything you need.
That hunger satiation connection really comes into play. And that's what she was saying about the toppings. That can interfere with our hunger and satiation because it comes down to our past with food. Because we grew up eating waffles smothered in that peanut butter and syrup, glass of milk.
Specifically.
And so when we have a little bit of butter and jam on toast today, you bet it takes us back to the past. And so those connections are valid and they're present, and that's why we choose, to just be mindful of the toppings to the best of our ability, connect us to our true starch needs. Okay, so what am I talking about? How do we feel? She said excellent sex drive when we meet our glucose needs, and when we're hitting those proper portions as well, I'm going to say, because when we overeat, there's, it doesn't feel good. We might not want to have sex right after we eat way too much.
It all balances out though. When we overeat, then we notice that we have to balance it out. And so
when we're hungry, we don't want to have sex. When we overeat, we don't want to have sex. I'm just saying, when we hit our proper portions, we'll be hitting the optimal sex drive, okay? Excellent energy to train and recovery. Oh, yes, please.
Flying off the walls.
And we recommend like 30 minutes a day of like a moderate intensity nose breathing, 35 in our body building classes. 35 minutes a day of your moderate intensity nose breathing full body activation class. That meets your resistance training needs for the day. And then we also recommend the 30 minutes a day meditation, self-love, deep flexibility, and mindfulness rebounding class that we offer daily, 6 days a week. That's the beginner's class. We call it beginner, but we're loving those classes, and we recommend it for every single person. So that would be like a 60-minute bounce session every day. But don't get started like that. Transition, okay? No. Take like at least 3 months. That's our recommendation. Just being patient like that. You will be so happy you waited. So weight loss and management is easy. Weight loss and weight management is easy when we meet our glucose needs. and when we are connected to the menu that we love most. I want to actually talk about that. Nails and hair are strong and
So
healthy.
strong. Don't pass these quick. Strong nails.
And hair.
We're telling you all of the things that
skin,
come
clear skin.
with being on top of glucose needs, meeting glucose needs.
And we'll say starch needs.
Ask anyone that you're following. If you're following Gabrielle Lyon and you want to be in her comment section, ask about the health of all of these things, because when we're glucose deficient, these parts of our bodies become unhealthy. Hair, nails, skin, organs, energy, sex drive, bowel movements, motivation. Hear these doctors talk about motivation and hear what they have to say about how you need to stay consistent and motivated.
That doesn't
They
come down
take
to doctors.
caffeine.
So do
They
we.
use caffeine.
So do
we have
we.
a cup of coffee in the morning. We're not talking about using caffeine for energy all day long. We're literally flying them all day long.
We have a cup of coffee in the mornings.
Everybody
and we enjoy it.
And we have a cutoff.
Our mind to coffee
That's
connection
right. When I
has a
had it,
cutoff.
I don't finish my coffee every morning. I dump this much out. We pour 16 ounce, and I sometimes dump half of it out, because when my brain hits right at that point of happiness, I don't want to overdo it.
I mean, imagine you're now that person who just stops and starts
Just
as
knows.
needed and
Just
just
knows.
connects to their needs and lives their best life. That could be you, and that is, that could
Starts
be me,
with
that could
nose
be
breathing.
anybody, that could be us, and that's every
starts
day is
with
an
nose
opportunity
breathing.
to be masterful to the best of our ability. So digestion and assimilation and elimination is perfect. We have excellent digestion. We brag about it a little bit to each other, and
The
it
elimination
feels so
is
right.
phenomenal.
It feels so right. Okay.
Wait, should we talk more? What should a bowel movement look like?
Well, it should feel right.
It should feel right. It should look like right.
It happens fast, and
There's no what do you call it when you push?
you know what?
There's no push.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes the colon gets a little more dehydrated. I have
That's
had
right, because
my
there are
fair
nights.
share of dehydrated bowel movements. Okay, it's not like all of a sudden we turn starch-based and now every bowel movement is a 5-pound dump and every single pee is clear. That is not how it works. Okay, we have a
We're not
daily
claiming that.
responsibility
It
of
comes
doing
with
our
practice.
best to navigate hydration and navigate our starch needs and navigate sleep and navigate energy from our exercise and all these things, and the nice alignment and balance with all that can really help us to be hydrated.
How good is sleep?
Water intake, did I mention that? Hydrated and great bowel movements. So muscle definition is mind-blowing. That comes from jumping.
Yes, but our diet has us so lean that the muscle definition is
the muscle
vibrant,
the
is
muscle tissue,
dynamite.
the tissue we're building is lower in body fat. The tissue is smooth and clean,
I
and then
feel hard as a rock
we're
everywhere.
more ripped than you might realize just by looking at us. But like
if we were to reduce
jumping builds that full rounded muscle tissue that never goes away. You can take several months off and just health balance, and then all that muscle tissue sits there full-time permanently, and then you can jump for the rest of your life. So there's no issue with staying consistent with jumping unless we get injured, which we would recommend gentle rehab. And I can brief on rehab real quick. If you face a weakness or get an injury, you need to rest it if obviously there's immobility and you need time to rest. Rest is your first priority. But then when you know that you are ready to do something and move into a weakness, what you need to do is there's steps of rehab. One being that you would first need to ice it and elevate it and rest, and then you would need to start creating circulation. So nose breathing, period, no questions about it. And you kind of need to, we can talk about certain body parts, but you need to just navigate, how do I bring circulation into this area, mouth closed, and you need to do this several times a day.
We learn in our classes, daily classes.
1 to 3 times a day. And then if you're circulating with aggravation as the result, just back off, don't give up. Just back off and don't give up. Well, the goal would be to just get under that threshold of adding circulation and nurturing once a day, once a couple times a day, to getting into circulation. And then you need to start focusing on a little bit of stretching and movement. And then I think the final phase would be adding resistance to the area. So if you have a weakness, you need to brave up and get started on your rehab, because you will be so pleased at how quickly you will rehab your injuries. That, I think, is the biggest mental block, is it will heal on its own, or I cannot strengthen this weakness. BS. Yes, you can. It won't necessarily recover on its own. You need to incorporate circulation, daily circulation, if not several sessions of focused circulation, not intense circulation, just getting the muscle, whether it's elevated or getting it to gently bounce.
I feel like I'm the injury expert. I have healed every injury.
Yes, we've both had injuries
So you
throughout
can
our whole
ask me.
body.
Come
I
into our
just started
Facebook group.
rebounding. Go ahead, sorry.
I
Oh yes, ask us in Facebook.
come into our Facebook group and ask me, but I can also tell you now that stretching is what heals injuries.
Open
It's
it up.
stretching.
Nose
the
breathing.
injury, and it's bringing circulation while stretching. It's the magic.
Magic.
It's the magic.
So just wanted to interject with that, and I want to say, if you have I have a weakness, or I have a pain, or I have an injury, what do? You know what we're going to tell you. So mood management feels under control. So we are much more balanced in our mood. It's not perfection, but it is so much more smooth.
I want to
throughout
interject.
the day. Go ahead.
The whole idea with bringing the hormones into balance through starch-based eating, nose breathing, jumping instead, and staying on top of our hydration, we get to manage our lives so that we can have little things like alcohol and like staying up late and like junk food every now and again and coffee in the morning and, you know, long airplane rides where we're potentially getting a little dehydrated, long car rides. The point is that we are learning, we are able to manage ourselves better. If we don't have the foundation of our health in check through the methods I just listed, then managing ourselves through the wave of life, which is exactly what I just mentioned, where there's things that we want to engage in, sometimes caffeine, alcohol, partying. Some of us don't do any of that, but there's a lot of us that do those things. And when we have better mood management, we can manage ourselves through these lifestyles that we choose to engage in. And that's the joy of life, because some of us like to be challenged, right? You think that these doctors that are in the gym pushing really hard, they're in there to challenge themselves big time. I feel sad sometimes for people that are pushing really hard, because we go so easy on the rebounders because we're nose breathing, we're staying in that nose breathing safe zone. So even though we're pushing our bodies, we're never going hard. We're never in hard world. So anyway, we really want to just understand that you get to be in control of your life. The last thing that you want is anxiety to creep in and for you not to be able to manage it. For depression to creep in and for you not to be able to manage it. And then most importantly, for sickness to creep in and for you not to be able to manage it. We nip sickness in the butt like that.
Like a flu or an infection.
Because as soon as we start to feel our immune systems dip, we immediately start eating more starches. I will sometimes take it so seriously, like if I get a tickle in my throat, that's pretty serious because I've pushed hard, I have had extra stress in my life, I pushed too hard. It happens. I will literally on the hour, every hour eat. And I will start to just fill up like a balloon. So I'll also be putting water back. I don't even care. I have learned to manage myself, to take a step up as the manager of my employee organs, of my body, and to manage them by giving them what they need to get back on trophy track. And that includes depression and anxiety. When we know how to manage, when the anxiety starts to creep in, I know how to manage it with nose breathing, with potentially getting some fuel, with potentially closing my eyes and meditating, with potentially getting on my rebounder and jumping instead. Depression comes in, we need to manage it. We don't want to end up in bed for weeks at a time or depressed or not going after our goals and dreams in life. Because we all have goals and aspirations that we want to go after, and depression will literally stop them from happening. And so let these tools be the foundation of you building an opportunity to take a step above your life and to be the manager of yourself, and to have that confidence that you know how to take care of yourself so that you can go after your purpose here on earth and feel so good. Every night you go to sleep.
Well said. The manager of our lives. And being able to navigate that depression, anxiety. I really resonate with that. And I want to say that one thing that I've been noticing in my life is that if I do go out and have alcohol, or if I do drink too much caffeine or get dehydrated, all these things, one thing that's really, really coming in handy for me is to not be in a dialogue in my head where I made a mistake.
Right.
Instead, just say, that was meant to be, and I'm supposed to be learning, whatever, if I'm having a negative symptom.
You chose to do that.
I chose
Is that
to
what
do
you
it.
mean? Or you accidentally drank too much and you got a hangover and now you're like, okay.
Stop being hard on myself.
Yourself, yeah.
Stop saying that I should have done it differently. And just stop thinking about it. Like if I start to get negative about the past, I just stop and move into the present moment, because that needs to just not at all happen. And that's when we start practicing that, we just notice that then we forget. Because, we're human. We're going to live our best lives, and we're not going to necessarily make every perfect decision. And that's one tool to keep ourselves, to be managing ourselves and our emotions, is to use that either pen and paper or that self-talk, and be more positive toward ourselves and connect to loving ourselves.
And one thing I like to do too is focus on an organ the next day. Or so, for example, the other night she got hungover, and a few weeks ago I got hungover. It can happen. It's annoying. But
who had more fun?
The next day, I'm going to love my bladder by getting it so hydrated. I'm gonna love my kidneys, and then just stay in bladder, kidney focus, right? And so then it's nurturing. And so I even got to a point at one point last year where I was actually consuming more alcohol than I like to admit. And I was doing it by saying, I'm giving myself the opportunity to love myself more the next day. And I know that you might just be like, this is the worst freaking advice ever. But I was in this cycle of drinking more. It was lifestyle choices at the time. And every morning, next day, I go, okay, today's nurture day. And I always would balance it. And that's what I say as the foundation of, once all of these strategies unfold into your life, how the balance starts to fold, you start to learn balance. You get full, you learn how to balance that out. You overtrain, you learn how to balance that out. You don't get enough sleep, you learn how to balance that out. You're not hydrated, you're overhydrated, you balance it. And that is you, again, being manager and being able to bring yourself back into balance. And so it's okay to be on one side or the other of the teeter-totter, because you know that you're in balance. And you know that when you tilt too high or too low, then that's a sign that you're still learning how to come back into more balance.
And I can't say it enough. If you don't know what to do to balance out in the moment, just nose breathe and refer to your journal. How do I balance out? Yes. Answer the question for yourself. Yes. See it if you can, because sometimes we don't refer to ourselves for the answers enough, and our intuition is ready and waiting to be a part of your experience. The intuition is there to guide you on so many levels. So
last thing, I'm not sure if, go ahead for me and tap the screen if you don't mind, 10 times or 5 times or 2 times. Just tap the screen, because we were told that it helps with algorithm. And so if you want to do that, that's helpful. Also, liking the video. Your comments have been amazing. Thank you for all of the comments. And so
if it's not the screen, and if you can see a heart button or the emojis, tap the hearts.
Do the comments stay on the post? They don't, or the video?
No.
Okay. So what if you want to help because you learned something from this podcast, please comment below, and you can comment your favorite thing that you learned today.
But it wouldn't be in the live
So
chat.
not in the live chat. This will have to be when the video ends. If you don't mind just going down and just saying, hey, I really enjoyed the chat and I learned this from it, then people can come in and not, we want everyone to watch, but there are going to be people coming in and wanting to know what's this whole podcast all about. And so if you just say your favorite thing, then maybe that can help people
And
to learn some things.
We're okay with constructive criticism, and
Yes.
all feedback is welcome. We learn and we adapt and we change our dialogue sometimes based on your guys' recommendations. So we really appreciate everything that you wanted to say.
All right, Trophies.
We're almost done. I wanted to say one thing. We're going to actually be donating a couple rebounders to the local firefighters in our town. We live in Bellevue, Washington. And it just sparks my interest to tell you that if you don't have a rebounder already, if the one thing you can do, if not to jump instead, but if the one thing you can do is to get yourself a quality rebounder, is to use it for mind activity and for mental health and for helping your body to circulate and stay mobile and keep you on your feet till, for the rest of your life. Because the strength it requires just to gently health balance is something that even maybe some seniors and elderlies don't have the opportunity of doing, or they're not strong enough to do it right now. So just think about that. Like a senior that can't bounce on a rebounder because they're too weak, if you're able to bounce, do that 1 minute bounce, once or twice or 3 times a day, a couple minutes a day, just for the circulation benefits. And notice that when you jump, it's kind of like you're on that walk and you're like getting into it and you're like, wow, I'm really feeling good. I'm really thinking clearly. Wow, I'm getting creative. I got those good ideas. Well, jumping activates brain chemistry and really gets the mind firing. Tony Robbins uses the Cellar Sizer Rebounder before he goes live and he does his presentations because he is on point with his brain activity, with clarity, with mental focus, and it's not all from jumping, but jumping plays a huge role in that.
Yes, he does.
And so we just want you all to have a rebounder, even if it's just for brain health, for circulation, for more mobility. It's safe for all ages. We want to dispel any misunderstandings where the kids think that, or the young adults think that jumping is for seniors, and the seniors think that jumping is for kids. And ultimately, rebounding, jumping on a high quality mini trampoline can and should be for everybody. If you're a human, you should be in the up and down motion, connecting to I'm going to say there's multiple types of resistance. You could be on a bungee rebounder, you could be on the Cellar Sizer, or you could be on a cheap rebounder. You know what? To each their own. But getting in that gentle pumping action into the cells is going to enhance your health in all ways possible. It's going to assist you with whatever diet you choose to eat, with whatever exercise you choose to do. It's going to enhance your life and your energy levels and your health.
McKeown is spelled McKeown. Patrick McKeown, Oxygen Advantage.
That's our nose breathing
James Nestor, Breath, and then Dr. John McDougall with the Starch Solution. ijumpinstead.com is where you find your rebounder, and then Andrew Huberman on YouTube, where you can find some awesome podcasts.
Yes.
Alrighty then, Trophies. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us on a Friday night.
It was
special so much.
It was special to be able to connect with you and answer questions, but also just give our feedback, our side of the story. And we don't mean any hate or shame.
No judge, no hate.
All these experts. In fact, it's our favorite thing to do right now is to just watch, learn, and obsess. And we ultimately admire these doctors that we were referring to in all ways.
We're still watching them. We're still learning from them.
We all have the best intentions. We never want to be offering harmful advice to you, and neither do they. And so we're all in the same boat. So we're ready to have a discussion, more discussions, maybe even with them someday. And we're just happy to be here and share our perspective. And so leave more questions in the comments if you have them. Visiting ijumpinstead.com is an option to help you navigate it into a new jumping journey, or please ask us questions about the Starch Solution by Dr. John McDougall and the McDougall program, drmcdougall.com is your best resource for questions about the starch solution menu.
Barbara O'Neill was mentioned in the comments as well. Okay, Trophies, we'll see you very soon in your next Rebounder workout, hopefully. As you know, we
Yes.
go live Sunday through Friday on I Jump and Said YouTube, so jump in and join us. We can't wait to see you there.
Yep, we got beginners classes for free, bodybuilding classes in the membership. Hopefully we'll see you there long term, short term, sooner than later. Love to you all. Take care.